Elise de Clorance, you have been sentenced to death by fire. Imagine ruling over an entire nation, married to the person of your dreams. But because of your wicked selfishness and behavior, you lose it all. Your beloved hates you, and your people despise you. You're reincarnated in another world, where you try to make amends by becoming a medical doctor. But during an unfortunate plane crash, after saving as many as you could, you fail, only regretting the fact you couldn't save more. You reawaken back in your first life, back with your family, back in the nation you failed to rule, all for another chance to change your horrible fate from your first life. This is a story of redemption for Dr. Elise, the royal lady with the lamp, and my fourth video in the series. If you want to catch up and see how Elise lost it all, click the first link in the description and come back to this video. Otherwise, let's get started and watch Elise reveal her real identity to Graham and Ben. With Dr. Graham and Viscount Venn surprised to see her, Elise apologizes for concealing her identity. Venn knew she looked just like Elise, but never imagined she was actually the same girl he'd known all along. Venn explains they arrived after clearing up the misunderstanding with the procedure that was done to Duchess Harbor. He helped to dispel that the tracheotomy was not an act of disrespect towards the imperial family, and instead claims she should celebrate her incredible achievement. But she maintains a somber look, especially seeing Dr. Graham not looking her way at all. And things would only get more awkward, because while examining a patient together, Dr. Graham seems to only speak to her with formality. She tries to tell him he can speak to her in the way he always did before. However, he declines because she is in a much higher position than him. Upon opening her report, Graham makes a disconcerting look, which makes Elise wonder if he's angry with her for concealing her identity. He sighs, putting down her report, only furthering Elise's sadness. She'd like to explain her situation to him. After all, he's the only one here at Teresa Hospital who knows she's from the Clorance family. In the office area, Hans tells Elise he's looking forward to working with her, as Dr. Graham left work this morning. The next day, Elise looks for Dr. Graham, but it seems no one has seen him at all. During lunchtime, she enjoys some sandwiches and looks out towards the other doctors. She grows sad again, unable to find Graham. She learns from Hans there's a rumor that Graham requested leave and will be absent from the hospital for a while. He remarks Graham seemed a little unusual when he had left, and that even though he learns a lot from Elise, he loses a lot of motivation without Graham there to yell at him. Now, Elise is certain this is all her fault, just like it'd be my fault for not reminding you to like this video and subscribe to my channel, because at my Shoujo Weekly, I'm covering villainous anime like this one on a weekly basis. I even have a whole playlist you enjoy, so come on, hit that subscribe today. She decides to take matters into her own hands and gets dropped off in front of Graham's house. The nursemaid, Yodel, kindly welcomes Rose in, and inside, Elise marvels at all the medical texts Graham had read through and studied. She could tell Graham worked very hard. Yodel serves Elise tea and explains she tried calling Graham down, but he wouldn't come. He's been locked in his room for days now. Elise assures her that Graham applied for leave appropriately, so things are still fine at the hospital without him for now. This makes Yodel feel better that he's not causing trouble, but also she's excited to hear from an outsider what Graham is like at the hospital. Elise explains that everyone adores Graham. His directions are always exact, making all the apprentice doctors go to him for help first. Yodel was relieved to hear that, because growing up, Graham cried many nights, so much it was difficult to help him fall asleep, but given the way he is now, Elise really can't imagine that at all. Yodel gets up because she forgot to bring out snacks. She stumbles a bit, and even with Elise's concern, Yodel says she's fine, it's just that she's getting old. But it wasn't fine, as we hear the serving tray drop on the floor. Elise catches the woman, and when Yodel passes out, Elise calls out for Graham, who leaves his study to see his beloved maid passed out. With the carriage on the way to the hospital, Graham tries to figure out what happened to her. He asked his maid where she was hurting, and Elise picked up that she showed signs of pain in her abdomen. Elise then began to examine and notice swelling in her groin area. It's hard and won't push backwards. It's an incarcerated inguinal hernia. With the current symptoms, she tells Graham necrosis of the intestine may have already begun. If not treated immediately, it'll cause intestinal perforation and inflammation of the abdominal lining, putting her life at risk. With Yodel calling out to Graham in pain, he's determined to do the surgery with Elise's help. They begin a surgery to repair inguinal hernia and complete it successfully without any problems. Graham is a little exhausted and wants to rest a little now, so Elise offers to write up the report. Elise transcribes their operation, which included, after making an incision in the upper section of the hernia, they looked for a change in the color of the intestines and observed the blood flow. However, seeing Elise's handwriting, he stared in horror. He took the paper from her, saying he'll write it instead, seeing her terrible doctor's handwriting. While he works on the report, he asks why Elise was at his house today. She tells him she came to apologize because he seemed angry that she concealed her identity, and she was worried that he left for days because of it. Graham simply responded, "Angry?" with a quizzical tone. "Well, yes," Elise conveyed, showing the expression he made with his eyebrows drawn together, while he had concurrently sighed heavily. Oh, it all made sense now. He was just shocked at her handwriting because it's so bad it takes a long time to read, making her gasp in embarrassment. He explains he simply took time off to focus on his research, and that she was the reason he felt the push to do so. Elise always works her hardest. He recalled the hospital ward he had first assigned her to. Even within the hospital, that ward was known as one of the cruelest places. With the sight of the filthy conditions, he was certain that Elise was going to run away, but she didn't. Hiding her identity while aiming to become a doctor, studying on her own to learn medical science, he understood neither of these paths were easy, so he wanted to learn that strength from her. Elise tries to assure him what she's doing isn't so grand. However, he elaborates further that her skills are so sound. When she treated that one patient with the tension pneumothorax, the splenectomy, and even the tracheotomy she performed the other day are all things only she could have done. Graham acknowledges his shortcomings, even though he studied so hard at the academy, even having read all the medical texts over and over. Everyone says he has a talent for medicine. However, he feels no more than an average person who works his hardest. He sees Elise as someone born with talent, something that he's jealous of, and with a smile, he tells her he truly feels envy and respect towards her. Elise asks him why he decided to become a physician. He pauses slightly and closes his eyes and tells her it was because he had lost his family. 20 years ago, he had his parents, an older brother, an older sister, and also an adorable little brother. They would spend time playing together and traveling. He remembered every day with his family to be a happy one, until one day they were taken away due to illness. 150,000 people died in the Larage epidemic. His family had been infected too, and when they were on the verge of death, he wasn't even allowed to sit by their sides. With his family gone, he couldn't afford to pay for any of his maids or caretakers. The disease had stolen everything he held dear. But even being a ruined noble, the only person to hold out their hand to him was Yodel. They became like family. There was a time she had fallen ill and he had nursed her back to health. This is when he had thought to never let disease steal anything precious to him ever again. His losses and his precious remaining family gave him determination to become a doctor. After hearing his story, Elise found herself with a deep newfound respect for Graham and his moral compass. The two walked outside to the sight of the beautiful stars. However, he couldn't take his sight off the glimmering Elise, but when she noticed, he turned away. And walking in the halls on a different day, his thoughts of Elise actually made him blush, making him wonder why he feels so embarrassed. Back at the Clorance Manor, Elise sneaks her way upstairs, only to be joyously greeted by her brother Chris, who tells her she's going to be awarded the Order of the Imperial Rose due to her tracheotomy operation on Duchess Harbor. Later, Yodel wakes up to Graham sitting beside her. He blames himself for not noticing her condition sooner, but asks her to tell him whenever she's not feeling well. Hans peeks in, making Graham ask what he's standing around for. So Hans replies he's happy to be on regular routine, as he hasn't been scolded by Graham for a few days now, which had made him feel a little empty. But Graham doesn't really get what he means by that. The doctors pile in to get Graham's consultation on other matters, and when Graham takes his leave, Yodel smiles, remembering a young Graham crying over his losses, and mourning his family, when he had nursed her when she was bedridden, bringing her a 4-leaf clover for good luck, when he began studying medicine, and the late nights she would put a blanket on him to keep him warm, and when she stood beside him at his graduation, proud of the man he's become. Thunder strikes and rain falls, as we see Julian riding in a carriage staring at a book containing Elise's face on it. It seems that for the first time in history of the Empire, a woman will be awarded the Order of the Imperial Rose. However, the carriage makes a sudden stop, and outside Julian runs to Elise, who is perfectly fine, just a little startled. But the driver had flown off in order to avoid hitting Elise, meaning Dr. Villainess is on the job. As the rain pours madly, Elise assesses the man to have a broken bone. Oh shoot, she doesn't have a splint, so Julian offers to use her umbrella as one. Elise is at first concerned for Julian because she'd be getting wet now, but Julian thinks nothing of it, with Elise willing to get muddy in the rain. After bringing the carriage driver Daniel back to the child house to recover, Julian says she'll make arrangements for him to visit the doctor tomorrow. Elise then sneezes, making Julian concerned for Elise's well-being. Elise tries to leave because she doesn't want to impose, but with the thunder raining heavily, Julian tells her to stay over for the night. And now after bathing, Elise never imagined staying over at the child estate, since their houses don't really get along. Julian brings over some ginger tea, which she had started drinking since that time she was sick at the Emperor's birthday celebration. The warmth and improved blood flow generally increases the body's immunity. Hearing that from Julian made Elise excited. Could it be that Julian had been studying medicine recently? Julian confirms she had been studying because she was a little jealous of Elise. It seems everyone is watching Elise, so her every move is being reported on. There are even magazines with special collections of her on them. She then congratulates Elise on receiving the Order of the Imperial Rose and also being awarded an honorary knighthood. Right now, Elise is walking a precipitous path that no one else has managed. Where Elise walks, so many new hopes will spring amongst her footsteps. This all made Julian so jealous. She tried to copy Elise in the hopes of becoming somewhat like her. Elise knew it. Julian's heart was broken by her engagement announcement. Because the child family is a part of the nobles faction, her family and the crown prince are enemies. There would never be a chance for Julian and the crown prince to be together. Elise touches Julian's hand in order to console her. This reminds Julian that Elise has so many wonderful qualities, while she herself felt inadequate. But she stops herself to tell Elise she has a bedroom readied, and they can now both rest for the evening. The next day, Julian finds herself treating Elise. After reading 39 degrees Celsius on a thermometer, it's clear Elise has a high fever. Julian then gets a report that her brother has returned, so she has to go talk with him. In his office, Albert asks why Elise is in their household. Julian explains the situation, which relieves Albert because it would have been bad if they had actually hurt someone from the Clorance house. When he tells Julian they need to get Elise out as soon as possible, Julian responds only as soon as Elise gets better, leaving him to question if Julian is going to become friends with their house's direct political enemies. Back where Elise is staying, Dr. Kyle assesses her to, of course, have a cold, so he prescribes some medicine for Elise. However, Elise is only worried about carriage driver Daniel. The doctor tells her it's fine because of Elise's treatment. Daniel should recover in the next 3 to 4 weeks. But Elise won't take all the credit, as she gives some to Julian for holding down the splint while she tied it. The two ladies then smile at each other, which surprises the doctor as he'd never think to see Julian being friendly with Elise. He now thinks Elise may change more than just the medical world. Julian cares for Elise, wiping off her sweat and braiding her hair. Elise is happy to receive her care and tells Julian she's very kind. And Julian makes her feel at ease from the bottom of her heart, causing Julian to gasp and blush. She's never been told she was kind before. When someone's done something wrong or something she can't accept, she's always scolded them. That's just Julian's personality. The two girls bond on how they're both stubborn and hate losing, which makes Julian remind Elise of her old self. One time, Julian was taking her leave, and Elise stepped on her dress making her trip, and mocked Julian for being so unsightly. Or that time Elise was sprinkling pepper into Julian's tea, where upon sipping, she began coughing badly while Elise mocked her. Julian had received so much childish harassment, she really hated Elise from the bottom of her heart, making Elise saddened with a remorseful look. But Julian says it's different now, and she really respects Elise. Elsewhere, the nobles faction meets to discuss Elise de Clorance, the woman who's garnered tremendous support from the people. With her current feats, the entire empire is watching, especially after her being announced as the unofficial crown princess. As a consequence, this has made Prince Linden's approval ratings much higher, where previously the people preferred Prince Mikhail much more. And to them, if Linden ascends the throne, they know Linden will remove them. He'd never forgive them for what happened to his mother that rainy day. Mikhail, who had been silent the entire meeting, knows at least 3 who will die. His mother, his uncle, and himself as well. Back at the child manor, Elise and Julian enjoy sweets together. Elise then decides to empathize when Julian said she had nothing, remembering the time she was reincarnated as Song Ji-hyun, an orphan with absolutely nothing. But because she didn't have anything, she devoted everything she had to improving herself. Elise then tells her it's the people with nothing who can become the strongest. Julian warmly smiles, but pouts knowing Elise is trying to comfort her, and now she's confirming Julian has nothing. Elise gets so flustered because she didn't mean that, and she gets tea on the dress she borrowed from Julian. She promises to clean it and give it back, making Julian tease her for having to fulfill a second promise. The two laugh, and to end their time, Julian promises to do Elise's hair on the day she received the Order of the Imperial Rose. Back at Elise's home, her father shows concern after hearing she spent the night at the child house, but was surprised to hear she was treated very well. Chris loses it after hearing Julian the child had been taking care of her, and the brother and father only grow further in disbelief upon hearing Elise is actually friends with Julian now, all while Elise snacks on the sweets Julian gave to her. Wow, what a sweet ending to this episode. But what happened to Linden's mother? Hopefully you find out next week by subscribing to my channel. But for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.